Imagine you just woke up in a dense forest, somewhere between the trees, and it's getting warmer. You're one of the early hominins, just a boy, maybe only 8 or 9 seasons old. And as you sit up and look around, your family's camp is quiet. The fire from the night before has long since died, and the group's shelters, made of sticks and leaves, lie still in the morning fog. And you look for your father, the strongest figure in the group, already up and looking out for danger. Suddenly, your father's voice breaks through the silence. He signals to the group to move quickly. Your instincts kick in, but you're unable to help because you're still just a boy. From the distance, you hear a deep, ominous growl. You turn your head, and there they are, massive figures emerging from the trees. Megafaunas, or saber-toothed tigers, towering predators. They tracked your group down, and now your group's all scattered. Your father pushes you toward the others, shouting for you to run, but it's too late. Your father is caught in the beast's jaws. You hear him roar in pain as the others in your group try to fend off the attack. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the creatures retreat. Your father is gone. In that moment, something changes within you. The weight of responsibility settles over your shoulders, and you're no longer just a boy. You're now a protector, a hunter, someone who will carry the strength of your father forward. It's now up to you to learn how to fend for yourself, to survive in a world where life and death are decided by the strength of your body. You take your first steps into the world, one that will teach you the traits needed to survive. Strength, resilience, leadership, aggression, and protection will all become your way of life. How will you learn these qualities? Well, you watch the older men in your group, the hunters, the warriors, the protectors, each one of them living example of what it means to be masculine. These are the traits you'll carry forward, and this is your story. Hello there. কি অবস্থা সবার? আমার নাম জাওয়াদ হাসান. I'm a third year supply chain management major at Dalhousie University. আর এই চ্যানেলে আমরা ইতিহাস নিয়ে কিছু কথাবার্তা বলবো. We are going to dive deep into the philosophies and ways of living that can be drawn from the events of the past. In this video, we'll be looking back to the early humans, or our ancestors, who paved the way for modern survival instincts and traits. And we'll look at the traits, responsibilities, and philosophies that allowed their survival. We'll draw out lessons from their evolution that might help us in the modern world. So, if that sounds interesting, let's hop onto the period we're going to look at today dates back roughly between 7 to 2 million years ago. This was the dawn of humanity, the time when our ancestors, the early hominins, first emerged from the shadows of other primates. We're talking about species like the Australopithecus, Homo habilis, and the Homo erectus. These were the first beings to truly start walking upright, to use tools, and most importantly, to form social structures. The world they inhabited was vastly different from what we know today. The ecosystem was rich with diverse forests and open savannas. There were towering trees, rivers, and lakes, but lurking in these forests across the plains were dangers like megafaunas, like saber-toothed cats, and mammoths, for example. They were massive and powerful predators as well, like Dinopithecus, also known as the terrible ape, which was basically a baboon like ape. It resembled closer to the modern day mandrill, and these apes literally hunted our ancestors down. These problems are very different from the problems we have today, but in dealing with them, they're kind of very similar to the modern day problems that a boy might face today, right? The only difference is During that time, the human race or each tribe worked as a single unit for survival. Today, every individual has to fend for himself, and he has to protect himself from other competitors. And the biggest tool today aren't spears, daggers, or swords. It's power. It's power, social status, and money. Let's go back to the hominin period, right? Also known as the Paleolithic era. So, in this world, food was scarce and survival was actually a 9 to 5 job, right? So, hominins were in the top of the food chain during that time. Like us modern day humans, we're literally the top of the ecosystem. And in many cases, in reservations and captivity, we are actually controlling the ecosystems. But the hominins, they actually allowed themselves to thrive, right? They actually spent more time letting their intelligence and their social structures grow. And most importantly, the ability to work together, right? That's the ability that kind of helped our ancestors survive throughout the periods. So they formed family groups, and the males actually started taking responsibilities, right? This is where the survival traits actually started to emerge. That's why this is a period, if we're looking at a boy who doesn't, in today's world, who doesn't know what to do, where to begin, what are his responsibilities are, we should be looking at this Paleolithic period where the early humans first started to emerge. Because from their survival instincts comes the primary purpose of being a man, the primary responsibility of being a man. During the Paleolithic era, our ancestors, they formed small groups or small families. Like a handful of families would stick together, and usually all of their decisions were biological instincts. So they were all instincts meant for survival, right? The males, they took responsibility as hunter gatherers, and the females, they mostly stayed back and cooked food and took care of the children. So we can see that labor came into play very early on in the Paleolithic era. How did our ancestors actually face these dangers from other predators during that period? Because they weren't the strongest and they weren't preying on any other animals, right? You can relate it to modern day monkeys, right? Monkeys, they're vegetarians. Our ancestors, like the Australopithecus, they were also vegetarians. Occasionally, at the end of their evolution period, when they first started to show signs of evolving into the Homo erectus species, they displayed signs of scavenging for meat, right? Other than that, their primary food was dried grass, dried leaves, and etc., right? Well, what was the first trait that they showed? So, the men in the families, they displayed strength and physical abilities, right? How do we relate that to the modern world? Well, if you're a man and if you're a boy, you're expected to be strong, and you're expected to go out every day and fend for yourself and also for the ones you're responsible for, right? So that's one thing you have to keep in mind. Like if you're born a guy, that means it's a default setting. You have to head out of your home, right? And you have to do the work. I don't know what work that is, right? You have to go for the hunt. Now, specifically, hunting for resources. Now, what those resources are, it's up to you to decide. Like in the modern world, for most, it's obviously wealth. So you have to go out and hunt for wealth and provide that wealth back to your family. Second factor that allowed our ancestors uh, evolve and also survive during the dangerous periods was leadership and social bonding, right? It was during around the 7 million mark where Australopithecus species they started to display social bonding traits, right? Like when a member of the family used to die or pass away, the other members they used to feel grief, right? They didn't know how to bury the other member from the family. They didn't necessarily work out faith and religion during that time, but they felt something about it, right? They felt the loss of lives. And you can even see that in modern day apes as well. You can see if you notice some videos where if mother monkey or mother ape loses her child, she stays beside the child for days or even weeks. And then this distinct feature, the third one that our ancestor possessed, it was beastly aggression to protect their families, to protect themselves and their tribes. Now, this aggression, from what I've noticed, is mostly it's diminishing from today's world, right? In today's world, like everybody has digital products in their hand, and these products are making it worse for people to go out of their homes, people to learn about the world around them, right? And people have this perception that there's no external threat that's going to harm them, right? I grew up in a similar way, right? Till my 20s, I grew up not knowing about the world that much, right? But after my 20s, I slowly started to see the world, especially when I moved to Canada for study. Before my 20s, I was chilling basically, right? And I didn't have aggression in me. I did have aggression, but the triggers weren't external threats, right? Right now, I see what my external threats are. In During our ancestors' times, external threats were other animals, right? Other beings. In today's world, external threats comes from your closest friends. Betrayal. People who don't even know you start talking about you here and there, right? And if you're doing a bit well, everybody like crabs, they try to drag you down for some reason. Now, that should be our trigger for aggression. And as and if you're born a boy, your aggression has multiple depths to it, right? Say you have a business, right? Unless you attach your ego to that business, you aren't going to go far with it. If some external force comes into play and tries to hurt your business or tries to cause some harm to it, your ego has to come in place because that's when you can fight it back. You have to treat your business like it's your territory. For our ancestors, their families were their biggest concern. Their families and survival was the biggest concern. So they attached their egos to survival and they just had to survive no matter what. So when the external threats came, the men of the family they sacrificed themselves. Some got lost in the fights against the megafaunas and the predators of that time and never made it back. Some made it back, but they might have had their eaten up. They might have had their legs eaten up, right? And they had to heal all those wounds on their own, right? We didn't have medication at that time, right? And I think all these medication and modern day remedies they kind of made men very weak in nature. Men aren't born with an ego anymore. And this kind of brings us to the last trait that we can observe from this period, which is resilience and adaptability. So, the ability to bounce back from the failures and learn from mistakes was another trait that ensured survival, right? During that time, our ancestors, they were very keen, they were very observant, unlike us today. So, say they lost a fight against a group of predators, right? They would either form a defensive strategy where they would avoid the predators at any cost, or if they were a strong tribe, right, they would devise like an attacking strategy where they would catch the predators when they were least expecting it, right? That's how ancestors learned to take down mammoths in the. All right, let's get to the philosophies we can draw from these survival instincts and the Paleolithic period, the period where Australopithecus, Homo erectus, and basically our ancestors lived in. Well, one philosophy is the philosophy of survival, right? At its core, the early human experience was driven by the need to survive only. Men's roles were clearly defined, unlike today, where you're born a boy, right? Till you're 20, you don't even know what you're supposed to do, right? That's a very bad situation to be in, right? As a man, at least by 20, you needed to know your basic duties, which is survival, protection, and provision, right? I feel like if parents, instead of like disciplining a boy all the time, actually taught him skills related to these areas, like to survive, to how to protect other people and provide for other people, men would be established way early in their careers, and they would automatically be disciplined to begin with, right? So these traits were not just instinctual, but deeply tied to the way early humans actually interacted with their environment and each other. The second philosophy that we can draw from this period would be the warrior ethos, right? From the from the early men who fought off predators to those who led their groups, the foundation of the warrior ethos is clear. Leadership, strength, aggression, and resilience became the bedrock of masculinity, human survival, and family structure that were tested daily in the struggle to survive. Boy, a mindset instead of always trying to control him, discipline him, you know, teach him the warrior's ways, right? Teach him lessons about resilience. Teach him um, methods of controlling aggression, right? In today's world, aggression is a really useful thing in a man's life. Aggression and ego, and that's where you'll see like a lot of fighting styles come into play, right? Fighting styles actually promote aggression being focused on a specific area, right? And it's also kind of a venting mechanism for men. Last philosophy that I think I found out from this period would be kinship and responsibility, right? The idea of kin selection, that men protect their families to ensure the continuation of their lineage, was not just biological but very philosophical when you look at it, right? How would you say during that period, in when there were like predators and stuff like that, did our ancestors all of a sudden come up with family planning, right? Like, what in the world was that? For thousands of years they were living like monkeys here and there, like any other animal, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, let's just start living in troops, right? So it was a very selective procedure. For I think How it would have started would be like two tribes fought off against one predator at the same time, and they had casualties from both tribes, and then they kind of joined forces, right? Then it became a bigger tribe. That would be one logical explanation. The other logical explanation would be the philosophical one, where where an individual hominin decided that, okay, um, I know that I can protect myself. I have to find someone else who can work with me and fight off these predators. Then we can fight them off together. That's how they joined forces, right? The weak ones saw them. The weak ones were like, okay, we need protection, and we believe that these two hominins there, they can protect us, and it was a very logical choice. So the first steps of our ancestors were more than physical. They were the first steps into an identity. They learned to survive, to lead, and to protect. The masculine traits we see today, like strength, leadership, aggression, resilience, were forged in the fires of early human existence. These traits were not just survival mechanisms, but the beginning of something much larger, a foundation of how men would navigate the world for millennia to come. If I were to relate this to the modern day, if you are a boy watching this video, regardless of your age, or let's just say you're in your teenage years or in your early 20s, the primary skill that you should develop, or your primary purpose that you should aim to work towards, is survival. Survival for yourself, survival for your family, and survival for your friends, which is basically your whole kin. In the next episode, I'll continue the journey through history and explore how these early traits evolved and gave birth to other traits that humanity needed to survive. But remember, the challenges these men faced are not so different from the challenges that we have today. We still carry their legacy within us, right? And their stories can guide us in becoming better. And this is why I intend to start this series where I look at mistakes from other people, basically, right? And I wanted to start from ground up, right? Look at what mistakes our ancestors made, how they solved their problems, and link them to the primary world problems that we have today. The problems that an individual man or a boy who doesn't have an idea where to go, how to lead his life, and what skills to develop could learn from. With that, I'll end this episode. And in the next episode, we'll learn more about the Homo sapiens and what actually happened after the Australopithecus started to evolve.